Today I'm going to talk to you guys about the best places to sell your produce. I'm going to specifically talk about 6 different marketplaces, and I'm sure there's more out there, but these are the ones that I've identified as the most common to market gardeners. Alright, let's start with number 1, farmers markets. These aren't in necessarily order of importance, they're just, the order is arbitrary. But farmers markets are the easiest thing to get started with, more or less, when you're a starting farmer. So I understand that there's different markets. Somebody's probably going to say, hey Curtis, my market has a 1-year waiting list. Okay, I understand that. But in general, a farmer's market is a really easy place to start if you're a new farmer. Mainly because the market stream itself is very simple. You show up with stuff, put it on a table, people give you money. There's no terms of payment, there's no setting up accounts, there's no having to go out, pound the pavement and build those customer relationships. You stand there, people walk by and see you and they buy your stuff. So it's really simple in that way, and it's a great place to start for that reason, because it's more forgiving when you can just show up with X amount of units one week. You might not have that exact same amount next week, and the customer more or less won't notice. So it's really lenient and flexible when you're starting out, whereas some of these other market streams I'm going to talk about are a lot more complicated as far as how it relates to your production in the field. So farmers markets are a great place to start. One of the best things about them is the fact that you get cash money the day that you're there. There's none of these other market streams work that way. A farmers market is completely unique in that way, and there's a lot of advantages to that. So it's really important to keep that in mind. However, markets will be different depending on where you live, and that's an important thing to understand. So if you don't have good farmers markets in your area, then this isn't a market stream you should bother pursuing. I'm all about going the path of least resistance, finding the easiest way with the least amount of effort to get paid. And that is just going, that's sort of universal in business. So if you're having to fight it to get market share there, then it's probably not worth your time. But if it is a good farmer's market, then it can certainly be worth your time. Some basic numbers: a lot of farmers, like I've visited hundreds of farms across the US and Canada, and the numbers can vary from anywhere between $200 to $6,000, even $10,000 at a farmer's market. It depends on the scale of your farm. So farms around my size, around 1/3 of an acre, so let's just say anyone within a 1/4 acre to a 1/2 acre, if you have a decent farmer's market, you could expect to bring around anywhere between $500 to $2,000 of product and sell that in a day. So it depends on, you know, there's a lot of variables there, but those are some numbers that you can start with. 2 really good tips about farmers markets. I have a whole video on farmers markets. Click up here and check that one out if you haven't seen it. But 2 really good piece of advice I can give you if you're starting in a farmer's market. Number 1 is, before you start at that farmer's market, be a shopper at that market and get a sense of what that market's like. If you sussed it out and you think that this is going to be worth your time pursuing, show up to the market at the beginning of the day, make a mental note or even take photos with your phone of what's on the tables. Show up an hour or half an hour before the end of the day and then see what's left on the tables. If there's an abundance of one particular product at that market that isn't moving by the end of the day, then that's probably one thing you don't want to grow. If you see something that is moving really quickly, is in you were there in the morning and it was long gone by the time you showed up back at the end of the day, then that's something that you might want to consider growing and do further market research into whether that's worth your time or not. The second thing is it's an old classic. If you have read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, you'll know this, that a person's name is the sweetest sounds to their ear. So I talk a lot about the Pareto Principle, the rule of 80-20, that 20% of your business will come, or 80% of your business will come from 20% of your customers. Within the first 3 markets, you're going to recognize people coming back. Ask them their name, remember their names, and refer to them by their names. Those people you should treat like friends, and there's nothing pretentious about that. Farmers markets are a great place to build community and get to know people. So there's nothing pretentious about it, but it will really show that you care about those people, and they'll come back and they'll bring their friends every time, I guarantee. Number 2 is restaurants. And again, these aren't in order of importance. Restaurants are, I won't say an easy place to start. There's certain degrees of restaurants that are easier than others. And I like to think about restaurants on a scale where you've got lower volume, owner-operator type restaurants down here at the beginning, and then you've got high-end restaurants like luxury hotels and resorts and high-end winery type restaurants over here. And there's some of my chef friends will probably laugh at this, but I also find that within that scale there is a certain degree of ego in that as well. Generally speaking, and of course there's many exceptions, because I have some chef friends that work for really high-end restaurants and they're the opposite of what I'm about to tell you. There's always exceptions, right? But generally speaking, the smaller scale, the more niche market the restaurant, the easier that chef is going to be to deal with. The bigger the restaurant, the higher profile the restaurant, the bigger the egos are going to be involved. And that's an important thing to understand, because you might not be prepared for some of the things that you will see in high-end kitchens. These are high-stress environments. People are paying hundreds of dollars per plate, and this is high stress for everybody in the kitchen, because there's that much level of seriousness that goes into the creation of that food. And there's pros and cons to both. I've dealt with all kinds, but as far as getting started with restaurants, the best place to start is on the smaller scale. So I'm talking about restaurants where there's maybe 2 or 3 kitchen staff. The owner operator is the chef and the creative person behind that, and then they might have 2 serving staff, and that could be it. Sometimes it's just the chef doing everything if it's a small kitchen, or they might have 1 or 2 kitchen helpers. Maybe there's 5 staff in total at that kitchen, but it's small. Those types of restaurants are easy to start with, because in a small kitchen where there's not a big line of command, they can change the menu on the fly. And if they're the type of restaurant that's looking to buy local, if you only had 4 out of 5 things that they wanted, then they can roll with the punches. They can change things up. These types of restaurants are often changing their menu every week or sometimes daily anyway, so that's easy for them. But on the larger scale restaurants where you might have 10 line cooks and all these different lines of command within that kitchen, they have very little flexibility on if you don't have the exact order that they want. So that means that it puts a lot more pressure on you as the farmer to have your shit together so that you're going to get them exactly what they want. So if you're going to start with the smaller ones and work your way up, the more confident you become in your production. But those orders are going to be smaller, and so those types of small kitchens might have orders that are anywhere between $100 to $200 a week. And if you're going to make some significant income from those types of customers, that means you have to have more of those customers. So the advantage on the high-end, larger scale restaurant is that you don't need as many, but they're going to have bigger orders, right? So these orders might be $1,000. I have some customers that in the summertime buy $1,000 of product per delivery, sometimes twice a week. So, but again, there's more risk there. The other risk to you is, have you got paid? And so I've talked about this before. I'll link to that video as well, talking about my experience with what happens when customers don't pay. But you do need to be careful there. And I would say if you're starting out, start with the smaller restaurants, because they'll often pay COD, which is cash on delivery. That's great for you when you're starting out. Then you don't have to have all the systems in place to manage these accounts. And work your way up to it. Number 3 are CSAs. CSA means it can be called a couple different things. Community supported agriculture is the most common one, and that is where you have a box program where you sign up a certain amount of members at the beginning of your season or in your winter. They prepay for a commitment to a box of vegetables for a certain amount of weeks of your season, and then you provide that box, and that box is a mix of whatever comes off the farm. So there's different ways of doing CSAs, and now with technology, where we can have customized ordering platforms and software that manages a lot of the ordering and taking the payments, you can structure CSAs in a lot of different ways. But at the fundamental of it, a CSA requires quite a bit of know-how on your end as a farmer, because you have to be confident that you can provide what you've promised, right? A CSA will often say, okay, in this month and this month we're going to have these vegetables, and by June we expect to have this, by summer we expect to have this, so on and so forth. So you have to be confident that you can follow up in your commitments, and that's where the risk is to starting. I don't recommend that new farmers that are totally green start with a CSA. It puts a lot of risk on you, but it also means that you have to grow lower value produce, which isn't a bad thing. But if you're small and you're starting with, I tell people, if you're brand new, start with a 1/4 acre market garden. And if you want to maximize the profit potential of that land, growing things like celery and cauliflower and cabbage and vegetables like this, they're lower value, they require more space to grow. You're not going to be maxing out what you could on your land. So a CSA is a good thing to work to, but it's not a great place to start, in my opinion. But I do know there are some exceptions out there. I know some people have started with CSAs and have done really well with it. But the other thing you need to keep in mind with a CSA is if it's not a thing that people know about, like if I say a CSA to a customer and they don't know what that is, now I have to educate them. So if you have to do that, then you're creating more work for yourself. And there's some places where CSAs are trendy and other places where nobody even knows what they want, and the idea of paying money up front for vegetables is completely foreign to them, and they might not be willing to take that risk. So if you're in a marketplace where people don't understand it, then the onus is on you to educate them, and that's up to you to decide if that's worth your time or not. So proceed with caution there. Number 4 are aggregators. So I've talked about aggregators in the past. In fact, I interviewed one of my customers that's an aggregator, Jay Coward. She's an awesome entrepreneur. Check out her video. And she's got a great business model. And basically what an aggregator does is they aggregate produce from farmers, and then they put it together in a box and they sell it. So aggregators, for the most part, are similar to a CSA. They've taken the onus on putting the boxes together and finding the customers and getting the product out to those customers and managing the payments and all that. I love aggregators because they take care of all that back end stuff that I'd rather not do, where I can just focus on delivering the product. And an aggregator is awesome, particularly in Jay Coward's case, where she'll give me an order and say, okay, in 2 weeks, sometimes we plan months ahead, she'll say, I want X amount of units. So it could be, I want 200 units of this product, and then I'm just fulfilling that order, and I know ahead of time. So it gives you a huge advantage as a farmer, because there's really no surprises there, and that product is going to be paid for. You're delivering this amount, you're going to get paid for that amount. So it's really advantageous as a grower, especially if you're specialized like we are on our farm. We're so specialized now that all we're really growing are variety of different leafy greens, a variety of cherry tomatoes, microgreens, and a couple different baby root vegetables. That's really all we grow on our farm. And so, of course, we've got other products within that list, but it really makes it easier for us to move volume on a small farm. So there's a big advantage there to a small grower. There's a big advantage to any type of grower there. But these are a new business model that are becoming more and more popular. Another type of aggregator that I sell to aggregates product and delivers it to restaurants that are further out in the province where there's no farmers around. So he aggregates stuff from me and a bunch of other growers and then resells it to restaurants that are out of the reach of normal farms. So he's found a niche in that, and so that's another type of aggregator. Essentially the idea is that they're buying product from a variety of growers and then putting together a total fresh sheet or box of veggies and then delivering that to the end consumer. So number 5 are grocery stores, and I've seen a lot more demand in grocery stores in recent years, like really just in the last 2 years, than I have in the last 8 of my farming career. And I attribute that to growth in farmers markets, growth in foodie culture, Whereas the customers at grocery stores are asking, why don't you guys buy local stuff? I want local stuff. So grocery stores are starting to ask. Now, selling to grocery stores isn't necessarily the easiest marketplace to get into. You need to have a lot of your ducks in a row, just like with the CSA or some of the larger scale restaurants, in that you need to be able to provide a consistent amount of product once that weekly amount is established. And so there's usually going to be a small transition period where you're bringing a certain amount to them, and they might get back to you and say in 2 days, we sold that week's worth of amount in 2 days, we need more stuff now. Or you brought way too much, taper down the order the next week. So there's going to be some give and take and a little bit of an ebb and flow to figure that out with grocery stores. But once you establish it, they're fantastic because they're consistent. And the grocery stores we're selling to right now, we don't have to check in each week on what they need. We have a standing order, and we bring that each week unless we hear otherwise, or twice a week in our case. So there's a huge advantage to that. But things that you need to have in place there are some sort of brand recognition. If you're just bringing generic produce to a grocery store, if there's a total demand for that product, then you'll sell it. But if you're bringing a product into a grocery store where there's other products, conventional or maybe imported products that are the same thing, you need to compete with them. So you're either competing on price, you're competing on quality, but you're also competing on brand recognition. And this is what worked really well for us after farming for a number of years and having really good social equity in our town, is that people recognized our brand and understood what we were about. So we don't even need to have a certified organic label, because people know our farm, and there's a lot of social capital in that trust that we have with people in the community. And so we have that brand recognition that almost trumps any other type of certifying body that would probably give us market share in that store. So that's in general, that's where certified organic is a really good thing. And a lot of people ask about whether I'm certified organic or not. I've done a video about that as well. If you have good brand recognition and good social equity in your community, you don't need it as much. Okay, so number 6 is farm gate. This is, for the most part, this is actually possibly one of the most common ways for farms to sell. But you do need to be cautious with farm gate. So farm gate, for those that don't understand that terminology, is setting up a stand on your farm and selling directly from your farm. And it's fairly common. You drive around farmland areas, I guess not necessarily big monoculture farm areas, but where there's family farms and stuff, and you see those little stands and somebody's there selling produce. Sometimes there's self-help farm stands, which I love if you live in a community where there's that much trust, where you can just have a box, put your money in, and it's a self-help farm stand. I love those kinds of things. But there's some things that you need to be aware of with farm gate. So I've consulted for a number of farms that have done farm gate. I've never done it myself because it doesn't really fit in my context so much living in a city. But with a farm gate, you really have to have an understanding of who are the people around you. And so sometimes that's just taking stock of the demographics of people in your community, in your neighborhood, or within a certain amount of square miles or kilometers of your place, to understand if those people are actually interested in buying your stuff. And so something you can do to figure out if there's interest is put a sign up. Like, say your farm is getting started, and put a sign up that says "Coming soon, farm gate." Like, we're going to have a stand here, and so on and so forth. You could have a website, an email address on there, and ask people if they're interested. But what you can do that modern technology has allowed us to do, I talked about this with I helped a farmer that I was consulting for do this, is put up a camera somewhere near that stand. And it could be on a post, it could be in a tree. You can get all kinds of different cameras. You could use a game camera, which takes photos when there's movement of something, and put that camera up and leave it running for a number of days once you have your sign up, and see how many cars slow down or stop to read the sign. So it's kind of sneaky, but it will give you a sense of by how many cars drive by, how many people are actually could be interested in that. That will give you a good sense of that. You could of course do surveys. You could have some flyers and go and put them in people's mailboxes, and you know, have some really easy way for them to contact you to express interest. But also just getting a sense of who your neighbors are, and if there's other farms around doing this, you know, is there an interest for this? So, you know, one of the great things about a farm gate is that you can do it in a variety of different ways. They can get really complicated where you've got a store and you've got staff in there, or they can be really as simple as a self-help booth that's there with some produce on the table. Or it could be somewhere in between where you've got a booth, but maybe it's next to your post-harvesting area. So while you're working, you might have a bell on the door. When people walk in, the bell turns on, and then somebody who's doing another task like washing vegetables or something like that can come in and help that customer. And there's an advantage there in the sense that you're stacking functions, because if you're going to really go all out with FarmGate and you're going to hire staff to specifically do that, then that's a consistent overhead on your costs for your farm. So you have to be careful with that and be aware that if a person is just standing there and they're not producing any value, then that's costing you money. So, you know, there's all these different scales to this, and it's important to be aware of, you know, what are the risks and what are the costs to you. So hope you guys have found that helpful. Leave your questions and comments below. Please like and share the video if you found this helpful, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a great day.